would you rank him amongst the GMs in the league? Is he top 10?
Top 5. Top 5. Yeah, I'm diving in. People hate me anyway. Yeah, top 5. It's not even close.
Huge, mega, it's Cowboy Week. Or is it? Well, that's one of the things we'll discuss today. And, of course, down the road, the Eagles getting into the playoffs. Jody Mack here with you. Jeff Kerr sitting in the co-host chair this morning. It's been a minute, Mr. Kerr. How were the holidays? They treat you well enough?
They were okay, Jody. I won't go into too much detail, but yeah, they were okay. I'll say this. I couldn't wait for December to be over for multiple reasons, but it was at least the Eagles got me through it. I'll say that. The Eagles in the NFL, it made the month go quicker than it should have been.
And the Eagles making the playoffs has gotten a lot of people through the end of the year. As we turn the page on to 2022, John McMullen, my usual partner, going to do the guest thing today. And as I just tweeted out, I have some concerns that the Eagles, who successfully gamed the system earlier this week by having a whole bunch of guys test positive, but knowing they could get them back if necessary, might do the same to John McMullen today. They may.
Well, I think the difference is I don't want me back by any necessity. They don't want me back by any necessity. But yeah, you might have jinxed me there, Jody. Thanks.
Yeah,
I think I'm about 187 of 187.
Very nice.
In COVID tests. So if you ruin the Cal Ripken light streak on the what could be the last one, by the way. There are negotiations between the Pro Football Writers and the league about stopping testing for writers because the players don't have the. So it makes no sense. But we'll see how it happens. We'll see how.
You sound like Tom Brady, who has been disrespected this week on this show. So I've got no problem disrespecting you either. So, yeah, we're going to break down not only this game, but looking forward to the next game. And guys, no new news. The Eagles are not going to go on the record, not that I expect them to, as to how protective they're going to be on their players in Saturday's game. Sirianni said on Monday and hasn't moved off it. Everything's on the table. They had a walkthrough practice yesterday, John. Learn anything? Tip their hand? No, a couple of guys out were with injuries, didn't even participate in yesterday's game. What have you been able to read of the Eagles' moves on the last couple of days since Nick Sirianni said everything's on the table?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is Jordan Mailata, Jalen Hurts, obviously. A couple players said they want to play. That's what the players are going to play in certain circumstances. They're going to want to play. Obviously, it's not their decision. So it isn't preseason. We talked a little about yesterday. You don't have the 90-man roster, so some guys got to play. I mean, that's just the math of the situation. So it is going to be interesting to see how Nick Sirianni.
So, did we lose Johnny Mac? We may have. We'll try and reestablish control with him. One thing he said, Jeff, that I was going to bring up a little bit later. A couple of Eagle players said, "Oh, they want to play. They expect to play." Yesterday, via the media, I heard Ike Reese and Mike Quick and Seth Joyner on NBC Sports Philly this morning. Oh, let the players play. Players play. Players, that's what the players do. Players play. Yeah, that's nice. I don't care. What the players want to do is not what's going to happen. It's what the coaches and the organization want to do. And if they think they are best served by protecting their players, guess what? Grab a good seat, guys, because you're not going into the game.
I agree with you. And the other thing, too, is, Jody, we have to mention this. Why would you want to risk injury when you know you're going to probably have 7 or 8 days to rest for that playoff game to begin with?
Right. It just doesn't make sense. John, you were saying, if you're back with us, the players say they want to play. Should come as a surprise to no one. What does that matter?
No, it doesn't. And that's what I said. I mean, it is going to be, Nick mentioned earlier in the week, he's only been in this position as an assistant really once. And it was back in Kansas City, and He was a lower level assistant. Todd Haley was the head coach, and Todd decided to play his players. Didn't work. I think they lost the game. I think they lost the first round of the playoffs as well. So he understands both sides, rest versus rust, that type of thing. And what I was mentioning about the preseason versus a preseason-like environment is you have those extra players. You don't necessarily have all those extra players, and that's where the COVID list gamesmanship comes in. The Eagles started early with Cameron Malveaux and Jacoby Stevens. They already elevated them through those COVID protocols. So they're already doing a little bit of shuffling from that perspective. And then obviously the guys who are banged up, you don't expect to see it all. So Sean Bradley got in the little fender bender last week. They already ruled out Miles Sanders. They were honest about that. And, anybody, Landon Dickerson showed up on the injury report with a thumb, which is new. Anybody's banged up, you would think they would err on the side of caution.
John, one of the players that I think would get a quote-unquote ceremonial start would be Jason Kelce. But could you see him potentially play in all 4 quarters if the Eagles want him to do that?
Boy, no, I can't see him playing all 4 quarters. I do agree with you, Jeff, because of his lengthy consecutive game streak and starting streak. I think he's one of the guys that's likely to be back on the active roster, and he'll be out there for the coin toss, and he'll start the game to keep that going. But, Jason's banged up, and a couple of weeks ago, when he hurt his ankle and he said, "Oh, it's a knee, it's an ankle, it's a foot, it's everything." And he's got this giant brace. He looks like, whatever. Between him and Mailata can't raise his arm to buckle his helmet. So maybe that will be that's usually Landon Dickerson's role. So now you got him with the thumb injury. Who's going to buckle Jordan's helmet if he plays? They got to play somebody, though. You only have, again, it's not 90 players. It's only 47 on game day. So some guys got to play at least a little bit. And then you hope, if it's going to be Brett Toth or somebody like that, or it's going to be Milton Williams on the defensive side of the ball, or Hassan Ridgeway, you got to hope they can go for 70 snaps and they don't get banged up. That's kind of where I think it's going to go.
All right, pardon the pun here, but will the Eagles on the offensive line be Coyote ugly on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, he's a possible elevation at some point, or they could do it either the COVID route, they could do it the practice squad route. He was one of the 4 players that were protected this week on the. You're allowed to protect 4 players on the practice squad, and yeah, even as late as week 18, there are other teams in this league that might come and try to pilfer a player. So the Eagles have used that list pretty frequently throughout the season. They've been one of the teams since it started last year. A lot of the teams don't even protect 4 players. We got in that discussion yesterday, Jody, about I got in a lot of trouble for saying, hey, you know what? The Eagles make better decisions than most teams in this league on a pretty consistent basis. And it starts with the general manager that everybody dislikes. And that's another example of it. Again, things you don't think of, but every little rock you can uncover to try to find an advantage, the Eagles usually find it quicker than most. And that's really, if you go back to the beginning of the Laurie era, I think there's 3 teams that have made the playoffs more than the Eagles. And they're pretty obvious. We all know one. I'm not going to disrespect Tom Brady in front of Jody McDonald.
About time.
That's obvious. The New England Patriots. The Green Bay Packers should be obvious for, bridging Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. And then the Indianapolis Colts, because, well, who did they have for very lengthy period of time. Peyton Manning, and that's why they've been there more. Now, the Eagles have had some good quarterbacks. You can call Donovan McNabb a borderline Hall of Famer. Probably not going to make it. Certainly not in the category of those four quarterbacks. Which that tells me over that span, and that is a significant, that's 90, what is that, Jeff? 95?
Yeah, 26 years.
Yeah. Over that span, you could make a strong argument that this franchise makes more correct decisions than any other franchise for the simple reason they don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback. They never have. They've had some good ones, but they don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback, and they are pretty consistently good. And that's where I talk about the fan base being a little bit spoiled. The younger generation, not people who remember pre-Jeffrey Lurie, they understand it's not always like this.
Yeah, one thing I always want to bring up to you, John, especially since yesterday of Howie Roseman, where would you rank him amongst the GMs in the league? Is he top 10?
Top 5. Top 5. Yeah, I'm diving in. People hate me anyway. Yeah, top 5. It's not even close. They don't. First of all, there's more to the job than picking players in the first round of the draft. It's a very big job. It's an all-encompassing job in the side of football operations. When it talks about, contracts, people kind of know that. But even stuff they don't know, hiring practices, you look at Joe Douglas, you look at Andrew Berry getting spun off to be GMs. Albert Breer every year does his top 30 GM candidates. The Eagles have 3 on that list. So when Jeffrey Lurie we joke about GM Factory. Well, there it is. Brandon Brown, Ian Cunningham, Catherine Raish. 3 of the 30 are in Philadelphia right now. They make a lot of good decisions. They make a lot of, and we joked about it with a little bit with the COVID stuff, but that's smart. That's smart. And then when you do get to the draft and people point out the obvious mistakes, the most obvious being recently Jalen Reagor, and even if you want to go back to J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and on and on and on, they're not looking at the New England Patriots. They're not looking at the Green Bay Packers. They're not looking at the Indianapolis Colts because guess what? They've made first-round mistakes as well. And they've made significant mistakes. And then there's no credit for fortifying those mistakes with the Jason Kelces of the world who's going to the Hall of Fame as a 6th-round pick. Obviously the Patriots get credit for that because they got Tom at 199 in the 6th round. There's no credit for getting Jordan Mailata in the 7th round, who never played a down of football, and developing him into one of the best tackles in the NFL. And on and on and on. Josh Sweat is turning into a tremendous player. I tweeted that out. I don't know if you guys saw me, but ESPN's pass rush win rate. I know Jody loves this one. Number 1, Myles Garrett. Number 2, Josh Sweat.
Yeah.
In the entire National Football League. 4th round pick. Yeah, I don't know. There's some good ones. And then this year, you do hit at the top of the draft, Devontae Smith and Landon Dickerson. I mean, Landon Dickerson is number 2 in the entire NFL at offensive guard for run block win rates. Number 2 as a rookie. I don't know what these people see, honestly.
You know what it is, John? I'll call them out. They don't want to admit they're wrong. And it's just like with Jalen Hurts this year. Well, he's not a franchise quarterback. Well, he's showing every signs he can be a franchise quarterback. And I think there are more Jalen Hurts defenders on here than most, but you definitely hear the vocal minority with Jalen Hurts. Well, he doesn't have the arm strength of Aaron Rodgers, or he's not Patrick Mahomes, he's not Justin Herbert. Well, no, he's not. But he's also not Baker Mayfield either.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, everybody makes mistakes. That's not, you can point out mistakes. It's easy to point out mistakes. I can point out mistakes at every front office in the National Football League. So that's why I had Damo on yesterday. The most obvious one is Jalen Reagor versus Justin Jefferson. Nobody is saying that is not a colossal mistake. If that's the only decision you want to base it on, that is a really, really poor decision by the Eagles front office. And you know what? I can also say, and this is not mutually exclusive, I can also say the Wilf family, which owns the Vikings, would sure as heck trade Justin Jefferson for the Eagles front office. Because over a consistent period of making decisions, the Eagles front office is going to be their front office. And that's the case between the vast majority of the front offices in the National Football League.
By the way, John, I'll add on to this too. The Vikings sure know how to pick a wide receiver. They definitely don't know how to pick an offensive lineman.
Well, yeah, exactly that. And, and by the way, if you want to use that team as an example, they also drafted Laquan Treadwell in the first round. Who might be the only first-round pick in recent years that you could argue, Jalen Reagor might be a little bit better than Laquan Treadwell. That's how bad he was. And, yeah, you mentioned, they can't. Them and Seattle have been the two sort of semi-successful teams that make the playoffs every once in a while. That can't find an offensive lineman to save their lives. It's pretty amazing. And yeah, I mean, the Eagles on the offensive line are just ridiculous. I mean, you have other teams spending first and second round picks on the offensive line, and they can't develop them. And the Eagles are trotting out Nate Herbig and Suo Peta at times, and they're just fine. I mean, Jeff Stoutland deserves a lot of that credit. But who hired Jeff Stoutland? Who was able to keep Jeff Stoutland through 3 different coaching regimes? Howie
Roseman should get credit for that. And you mentioned ratings, win rate, pass rate. Sorry if I've got an issue with ratings. Our friends at Pro Football Focus, again, came out with their ratings from this last week. Josh Sweat, the 4th best Eagle defensive player against Washington this week. Excuse me, Josh Smith. I think you said it to one of the coaches in the media session. Was that a game-wrecking game by Josh Sweat? And I agreed wholeheartedly with your question. But he was only the 4th best Eagle defensive player on the field, as per Pro Football Focus. So pardon me if I don't put complete stock into the grades this week. Although they did have Greg Ward as the number 1 Eagle offensive player, which I like.
But he had the biggest. He stretch of the game.
What I always explain. Well, number 1, it was the pass rush run. That's ESPN, so that's not Pro Football Focus.
Yeah, I'm just talking about grades in general.
Yeah.
When you can throw grades, subjective grades at me. I understand what are given stats in the National Football Leagues. Number of catches, yards running, sacks. Okay. Anytime subjectivity comes into it and grading who got a win rate is a subjective grade. I'm sorry if I hold my nose.
Yeah, but you know my thought on that. What just basic statistics don't add is the context of, who's throwing the
Pro Football Focus got Greg Ward as number 1. In the context of he had 2 catches. Come on.
No,
but he ran his routes right. That doesn't tell me anything.
Well, that's the thing. And it's a small sample size because whatever Greg played, Greg didn't play a lot. So you have to add that into it. And that's what it is. It's about consistency from play to play. So if you're, and I said this last week when he asked me this question, if you're looking at PFF grades and people do that and they just put, hey, these are the top 10 PFF grades, and they do it for every team. For the Los Angeles Chargers this week, these are the top 5 defensive grades for the Los Angeles Chargers. Well, that's not how you look at those things. That's not how coaches look at those things. Jonathan Gannon agreed with my question about Josh Sweat, and he train wrecked the game. And he was the defensive player of the game from the Eagles coaching staff's estimation. Because guess what? If you make a big play, so if you make a sack or you make a batted pass or you make a tackle for loss or whatever, you're going to get a really good grade on that play. And if you get sort of smoked on the next play and it doesn't even affect anything, well, individually, you're going to get a bad grade. The coaches understand that. So, they put more of an impact on impact plays than Pro Football Focus does. But nobody, when they put those things up on Twitter or people write about them, nobody adds the context or explains the grade. So, yeah, it doesn't. In that instance, it doesn't really matter.
John, one of the things I wanted to kind of address with this football team going forward, do you feel this team, this Eagles team currently constructed, could pass their way to, say, a playoff victory against a bad secondary? Do you think that's possible?
Boy, I don't know if it is, and I don't know if it is for a couple of reasons. One, I thought if there was any game they were going to pass to win, it was going to be Washington. I mean, especially early. Whoever they had, and I forget who it was, whoever they had trying to cover Devontae Smith was an embarrassment. I'm like, oh man, they can really take advantage of this. And they didn't. I mean, they didn't for the most part, because they have, and correctly so. I'm not killing the coaching staff. I mean, it's understandable why they have become a run-centric team, because they've had so much success. But I said, if this was the week, and Dallas Goedert was more, they couldn't cover him either. They had more success getting the football to him, just because I think Jalen is a little bit more comfortable throwing the ball inside than not inside the numbers, but throwing the football in a more intermediate area than a deep area or outside the numbers, deep down the field, where Devontae Smith would be, more explosive in a different offense. I don't think they're there yet in the passing game, but they're getting better. I mean, it's getting better. And part of it also is, and Jody and I talked about this yesterday, Jeff, is the compliments aren't there at receiver as well. So, if the Eagles do decide to go into a passing game, look, part of the reason Smith and Dallas are always open is that they're really good. Part of the reason is nobody expects the Eagles to ever throw the ball. They're now in this part where, okay, we got to stop the run. We got to stop the run. We got to stop the run. If all of a sudden they start chucking it all over the place, well, then you're going to see the bracket coverages and you're going to see things change on those two particular players. And then they're going to say, Quez Watkins, go beat me. Jalen Reagor, go beat me. Greg Ward, go beat me. And Jody might think Greg Ward's going to beat them, but I don't think Greg Ward's going to beat them.
Yeah, by hook or by crook, he'll help them get down the field. Jeff's question was dead on point, because it very much looks like, much to the chagrin of John McMullen and Paul Domowitch and everybody else who's been on the show this week, who have not shown enough respect for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tom Brady. Chances are they're going to be matching up against him, because most of the scenarios that play out this weekend lend themselves to the Eagles and the Bucs playing in the first game in the playoffs. The Bucs are number 3 in the NFL in yards per game against the run. Vita Vea is, talk about a guy who wrecks a football game against the run. He is that caliber player. Let's say the Eagles go 3 and punt in both of their first 2 possessions and are averaging 1.5 yards per carry, because Tampa can do that if they can shut down other teams' running game. Nick going to stick with it? Is he going to say, hey, they got to dance with the one that brung you, and we become a running team? We're going to run the ball until we can't run the ball anymore. Or will he divert and go, all right, yeah, we can't run the ball against this team and let Jalen Hurts drop back and throw it 35 times?
Kind of depends on what Tampa does offensively. Do they score twice? Is it 10-0? Is it 14-0? Yeah, then they're going to abandon the running game. If it's not, if it's 3-0, I think they would stick with it. If it's even 7-0, I think they would stick with it. Once you get down 2 scores, 2 possessions, then you got to be really, really disciplined. All I can go on from the first portion of the schedule, that's all we have with this coaching staff. They were not able to do that. And, against a team like Tampa Bay or any of the playoff teams, because if you look at them and you look at their explosive offensive abilities, I mean, that's not a good situation to be in because, well, by definition, the defense would be struggling. And to assume they're not going to continue to score is probably a bad assumption. So at that point, you almost have to abandon the running game if you're down 2 possessions, because if you're going to come back and win the game, you're going to have to win most likely some kind of shootout in that type of situation.
John, do you think there's any incentive for the Eagles to potentially try to take that 6th seed just so you avoid, say they win, they pull an upset, they would have to go play Green Bay, but they're the 6th seed, then it's kind of a hit or miss who they play in round 2, if they're thinking that far ahead.
Yeah, I don't think they are. But Nick's been pretty consistent. He's right when he talks about that kind of stuff. You can't control what other people do. You can't control those situations. If you're lucky enough to get to Green Bay, you're up against it anyway, no matter how, whenever you get there. I don't think the Eagles will think like that at all. I think their only sentiment, if they sit players this week, and I think we all expect them to, is to keep guys as healthy as possible for week 1 of the playoffs, no matter who they're playing. And then, you let the chips fall where they may at that point. I do think it's a little bit more jockeying for position. The best example of this would have been the double doink win in Chicago. Chicago had an opportunity to lose in at that point, week 17, against Minnesota, and they just dominated Minnesota that season. Akeem, we just talked about their offensive line. Akeem Hicks was probably the most underrated defensive tackle in football. He was right there behind Aaron Donald and Fletcher Cox at the time, and they just couldn't block him. And the Eagles had this great offensive line, as they always do, and the Eagles could block him, or at least do a decent job. And Matt Nagy said, no, we're going to play. We're going to win a meaningless game for them. And they got the Eagles, and they lost. And, the history is where it is, and now Matt's going to lose his job. He's never recovered from that loss. So when it's an obvious situation, I think there's some merit. When there's so much murkiness like there is now, you just do what you can do and control what you can control.
All right, so John, you got Wednesday assignments today in a different kind of week where the Eagles are going to play a Saturday game. So I know your week gets adjusted because of the time frame. When do you think you'll have a good grasp, hopefully in time to share with our Birds 365 viewers and listeners, as to what the Eagles are going to do as far as minutes for guys, snaps, level players, star players, guys coming up off the practice squad? And the same with the Cowboys, which is tougher to get that information, but it's your job, and you got to try and ferret it out. We're going to have to wait for the kickoff and see who jogs out onto the field, first possession for each team, to figure out exactly how much they are looking to spare their players potential injuries? Or do you think we'll have a better grasp of it before that?
Well, I think with certain guys, it'll become a little bit more obvious. Again, some guys have to play. So if you're looking at, starters, for instance, younger starters, guys who aren't banged up, they're going to have to play a little bit because of the numbers game. The most interesting part from the Eagles' perspective will obviously be Jalen Hurts, who was still listed on the injury reports yesterday, which was a walkthrough, so it was an estimation, but he was still on there with the ankle. So it's going to be interesting. Do they start him? Do they give him a quarter? Do they give him a half? How do they handle Jalen Hurts? And then the Cowboys, Jerry Jones is already on record saying they're going to try to win the game. Generally, Jerry tells the truth, whether people like him or not. And, the Cowboys do what he says. So, even Mike McCarthy didn't want to play certain guys. If the big guy down there tells you they're playing, they're playing. So you can argue what they should be doing, because it's very unlikely. They have a very small chance of being the number 2 seed, but it's very unlikely. So Mike has kind of spun it as, nobody knows Green Bay better than Mike McCarthy. And it's going to be pretty cold on Saturday night, at least the last time I checked. So he's trying to spin it as it'll be good practice if they eventually have to go to Green Bay to face the Packers. So I do think you're going to see more of an impetus from Dallas to win the game. And for the Eagles, it's more sort of targeted and how much do certain players play. I would be really, really shocked if at this point already, if Nick Sirianni just said, all right, we're going to play everybody and try to win this game.
John, what does Dallas actually gain by this, though? By beating the Eagles, say they beat them by 20 points again. What do they gain by this? I think we all know what they kind of are. They're a very good football team that can't beat any team that seems to match their talent level or is near their talent level at this point.
Nothing. They don't gain anything. People already know they're a good football team, as you mentioned. People think they're better than the Eagles already. There's actually more to lose than to gain. Again, then that small chance you have to get the number 2 seed, which I don't think is realistic. Maybe it was the emotion of coming off a poor performance against Arizona. And Jerry said, we want to get them back out there, get them back feeling good about themselves. But I agree with you. I think it's a mistake. And especially you would think losing Michael Gallup in that game for the season, you would think that would, raise some antennas and say, oh, you know what, this isn't worth it. Let's get to the playoffs as healthy as possible. But the Cowboys players are just like the Eagles players. They want to play. That really is more of a front office media fan driven thing. Because if it were up to the players, they would play. And that's everybody. They would play.
All right, J-Mac, last question. Since you put Howie Roseman in the top 5 general managers of the National Football League today.
Can I hear about that, by the way?
Yeah. I need to ask you that type of a question, because if you're going to get into the top 5, you have to be able to both narrow focus and also look at the 3,000-foot picture. Gardner Minshew plays well for the Eagles this week. He comes in off the bench. Jalen Hurts never sees the field. And despite the fact that he's playing with more of his second-team buddies than the Cowboys are throwing out there, he finds a way to win the game. And he is 2-0 filling in this year. the exact thing you're looking for out of your backup quarterback. You don't want to play it too much. That's a bad sign. But when he comes in, no drop-off. Let's find a way to win games. And Gardner Minshew will have done that if he wins this week. Did the Eagles keep him or trade him?
I could see them spinning him off for, if you think the Eagles got him for a 6th-round pick. If you can convince somebody that Gardner Minshew is a starting quarterback, that kind of all depends on the desperation of the other side. I think they would be very happy to keep him as a backup quarterback. We all know that Gardner wants to be a starter. He went up to Nick Sirianni and said, "What do I need to do to become the starter of this team?" and got shut down by the head coach. So I could see it going either way. What they're not going to do is give him up for a 5th-round pick, and say, "Oh, I traded a 6th-round pick. I'm giving him for a 5th-round pick." Now, if somebody comes in with a 2nd-round pick and say, "We don't have a quarterback," and we think, yeah, they're going to trade him. 3rd-round pick, they're probably going to trade him. Anything less than that, very cost-effective backup, and we know how this team values that position probably more than most. Another reason why they're top 5. This is a good backup quarterback in the NFL.
If they trade him for a 4th-round pick, then I'm sorry, Howie falls from number 5 to number 9 in my rankings, because then they just got to go out and get another backup.
Yeah,
if you've got a good one, why would you give him up to be able to brag and go, "Hey, gave up a 6th, got a 4th, great general manager"? Yeah, but then now you got to go out and get another backup.
No, that's what I said. If it's a 6 or a 5 or 6 or a 4, and you say that, I don't agree with that. If you get a 3rd, I'll trade him. If you get a 2nd, yeah, he's out the door.
Yeah, I would agree with the 2nd. 3rd, maybe. 4th, no. I think that Gardner will not be happy about it, but tough. Stick around and be the best backup quarterback in the NFL.
Well, that is part of it, though, as well. If he's going to create issues, and I don't think he would, but that is part of sort of the behind the scenes stuff as well. If he's that unhappy, that might change the narrative as well, but I don't think that's the case. I just think he's a competitive guy. And yeah, they'll just keep him because, as I said, he's very, very cost effective. And you've seen the backup quarterbacks in this league, and
we've seen him against the Eagles on almost a weekly basis.
Yeah,
during the second half of the season.
You mean you guys don't want Mike Glennon to be the Eagles' backup quarterback in 2022?
Or Sean Mannion. You got to see him live and in person on national television. Yeah, Gardner's a pretty good backup quarterback. So, that's another good example of why. And it's not just if it makes people feel better. I want to make people feel better. It's not just Howie Roseman. It's the Eagles front office as a whole. He just happens to lead it. They make a lot of good decisions.
Howie Roseman et al. We get what you're saying. And the only thing that Mike Glennon's got going for him is that he's a Jeff Kerr lookalike. But other than that, he does not belong in the National Football League.
I might be able to have a higher winning percentage in the NFL.
I would not be surprised if that were the case. J-Mac, if I jinx you, I'll apologize tomorrow here on Birds 365. But hopefully no issues whatsoever. We'll talk to you again tomorrow, buddy.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
John McMullen, usual co-host of the Birds 365 show here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. We got Jeff Kerr sitting in for him today. You Jeff Kerr fans out there, here's what you got to do. Hit that like button. Like, share, subscribe to us here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel as we get you ready for playoff football with the Philadelphia Eagles. Didn't necessarily believe this was going to be the case when we started this show 8 or 9 months ago. We appreciate you tuning in. Do us the favor, like, share, and subscribe here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel.